AI is changing every industry, but where should you actually start? In this episode, Luke Somerset shares why the real opportunity isn't replacing people, but using technology to capture the leads and opportunities that businesses miss every single day. Great. So Luke, thank you so much for coming to join me today.
No, thank you.
Really appreciate it. And so I imagine that you're one of the industry's best kept secrets, okay? And from my point of view, Seedpath AI and Finamply are the two best financial services businesses operating in UK estate agency. And that's not just my opinion. That's the opinion of Rightmove. I Am Sold, who are sending you a huge number of leads every month. I mean, if it's not commercially sensitive, like what sort of volumes are you guys handling?
We're well into the thousands.
Every month.
Yeah.
Your background is deep in mortgages and financial services. As part of the preparation for the interview, I had the wonderful observation that you weren't always in mortgages. What were you doing before that?
I did a stint in credit risk during a slightly murky time, as you know, with a very famous investment bank, Lehman Brothers.
Yes, so some of our younger audience might not have heard of them because, of course, they famously went bust.
Rather spectacular. Yeah,
during credit risk there. Okay, great.
Yeah.
What is Finamply and what is Seedpath? What do they do? And how do you think about mortgages in the context of agency?
Yeah, so I think, Finamply we kind of set up really with the intention of creating a proposition that works for the buyer, but also better services the estate agent. So, the gap we notice, and it sounds bizarre to say that customers not being serviced, agent isn't being serviced, but we always kind of saw the mortgage broker sat somewhere in the middle, somewhere sort of siloed off from estate agency, not necessarily sort of fully working for that customer. They'd provide the mortgage, but anything beyond that kind of becomes a nice to bolt on. Actually what we wanted to do was almost project manage that buying journey for the buyer. And in doing so, actually work with the agent a bit more closely to help identify properties, but also try and manage fall through as well. So, we work, as you say, I Am Sold are great. We have a great relationship with. We work very closely with. With auction as a prime example, there's a tight deadline.
Speed.
Yeah, speed. And actually, if you're traditionally, that's been the sort of home of property investors. Actually, for a lot of first-time buyers, it's a great opportunity to buy at auction. Yeah. You get a good deal. You're putting down a deposit on that property, but you're reducing the risk of gazumping. It's a brilliant proposition for first-time buyers, but most mortgage brokers shy away from that because of the tight deadlines.
That's right. They don't want to constrain themselves. And you guys are happy to take that challenge on.
Yeah, and actually work really closely with I Am Sold to get that case through within that deadline. And that does require a lot of dialogue both ways, and sort of case progression working very closely together, being very aligned on that. And that's kind of what we like. We have a lot of relationships with agents where actually we know that we can do a lot of the heavy lifting for them, a lot of the heavy lifting for the customer. Everyone benefits from that.
So where's the business based?
We're based in Herne Bay in Kent, which is pretty much France from here. So I think it's closer to France than it is to where we are now. So based in Herne Bay, but we've got advisors. We're mostly office based. We've got a few remote advisors, but we still like people in the office. We still think that's a really important part of our culture is actually our staff being able to share experiences and sort of share problems amongst the team rather than just being sat at home dealing with a problem on their own. I think it's really valuable to have them in the office.
So you were part of the big turnaround at John Charcoal, which is another sort of huge mortgage brokerage. What made you decide to go and join Mark Brooks and the team at Finamply?
Yeah, so the Charcoal turnaround, I'd always planned to stay until the turnaround was done. I think Charcoal was losing, the thick end of £250,000 a month when I joined. And I always had in my head, at the point that it becomes profitable, it becomes very difficult to lead the business beyond that because you become quite risk averse and a huge amount of effort and time has gone in. Do I really want to lead that business? So I'd made the decision to leave about a year before I did. COVID happened, which kind of delayed a few plans. And then I'd looked around. I'd looked at some bigger organisations, but Mark, as you know, is an incredibly entrepreneurial guy. I'd never actually worked in a estate agency.
Did you not? You never worked in the agency context until?
Never worked in the agency context. Always purely for brokers. Met with Mark, Rob, Ben, Simon at Miles & Bar, and actually that felt like a really good fit. It felt like those guys were very customer centric. It's a brilliant brand, really, really dominant player, and primarily dominant in East Kent because it focuses so heavily on doing the right thing by the customer, by vendors and buyers. And they had a good little FS business, good little financial services business, but wanted to do something a bit more exciting. And I think
so. Big vision there to take it on, and
big vision, and with Mark a huge amount of support to actually just crack on and get that done, which is kind of how Finamply was born. It was built around delivering a really exceptional service for its own estate agency. When it was Miles and Bar Financial Services, but that same value proposition actually works really well for other agents. And obviously Miles and Bar is subsequently sold, which allowed Finamply to sort of fly the nest and cut its own path. And I think actually, that value proposition, still remains actually that really agent-centric value proposition.
Sorry to interrupt. What is the scale of the business then? If we were looking at Finamply in terms of advisor numbers and like number of mortgages, that sort of stuff, like how big is it?
So we have, just over 40 advisors. We're going through a bit of a growth spurt at the minute. So we're recruiting on average probably about 3 advisors a month over the last few months, and that's set to continue. I think we'll continue that trend for the year. Mortgage numbers, what are we? We're a couple hundred mortgages a month that we write. We're very focused on protection because we think that is that is hugely important that we're having that conversation with the customers. So about 62% of our customers end up taking protection, and likewise conveyancing as well. So, as I said, the mortgage is important. That's what the customers come to us for. But it's the conveyancing protection. We're very, very, very mercenary on managing fall through rates, actually making sure that transaction goes through for the customers is the really important thing to us.
So revenue per transaction is something that I'm absolutely obsessive about whenever I work with businesses. So in general, when I go to an estate agency business and I say, tell me what your goal is, like tell me what your plans are over the next 3 years, they will answer broadly in the same way. And that is, I want to grow market share, I want to list more houses. Yeah. And they've got various ways that they might achieve that, marketing led or process led or CRM led or any one of those things. But they're all wanting to grow market share. Yeah. And that's great. But it's also a zero-sum game. Yeah. Your gain, unless you're creating a market, is someone else's loss. So they all want to do the same, so all fighting in the same thing. Whereas if you can add 20% to your revenue per transaction, where in the context of financial services, making sure your protection penetration's right, your conveyancing penetration's right, you're selling GI, critical illness, and all of the other products that you guys have got to sell, that is a better path to profitability than doing lots of volume cheaply.
Yeah.
Because lots of volume, if you list more houses or you do more mortgages, you don't make more money per customer, then you need more people.
Yeah.
To be able to facilitate that, which is more cost. Whereas revenue per customer, if you can find a way to create a win-win partnership, it really works, doesn't it? So how do you do that on a practical level? Like, how do you make sure that mortgage advisors who, some of them will be great at selling protection and some of them won't be, how do you make sure that you get that 62% penetration?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I think market share is a bit of a, to a degree, a bit of a fool's errand. I think, there's always opportunities to sell something else. So from our perspective, our mortgage advisors are very well trained on protection. We have a very clear process to introduce that, which again is customer centric. You can't just sort of rock up on a phone call and say, hey, have you considered what's going to happen if you die? Because most customers are going to shut down pretty quickly.
The phone as well,
and we do it over the phone.
So I imagine, I've sat in appointments when this has been done, observing mortgage advisors in my own financial services business, and face to face, I think it's easier to have that what we would call disturbance type conversation, isn't it? So how do you handle it over the phone?
So over the phone, it's got to be a step process. First call, we won't talk about protection per se. We'll talk about some of the risks involved in owning property, which I think are important for the customer to understand anyway. But we'll also start to broach the topic around things like trust. So we don't charge for putting things in trust, which is pretty standard for every mortgage broker, but it's an important point to mention on that call because it opens up a conversation around something that's going to be used in the event that you pass away without me having to confront you with the fact that you might pass away. So it stretches that customer's vision out. Budget plan as we go through, the what happens if, and I always like to think with customers there's a logical sequence that you can go through with customers around risk. Diving straight to death, most of us don't believe that we're going to pass away probably ever.
Yeah.
We recognise it's going to happen, but anytime soon is illogical. Whereas, starting with
The risk to the property.
the risk in the property, so actually, and it's starting with those simple risks, like what happens if you lose an income, how, and most of us have a way of coping with that, even if that's credit cards. What happens if it's longer term? So break a hip in a car accident, it's probably not your fault, but what happens if you're unable to work for a period of time? Elective surgeries on the NHS are just north of 2 years. What are the provisions there? And that leads into conversations around income protection. And again, kind of that kind of means that at the point you're talking about income protection, protecting your life, so providing that life insurance policy is kind of a given at that point.
Yeah.
But it has to be done over a period of time. You can't just dive into it. It just doesn't work. It has to be a slower process. And then other sales, we actually have other teams within our business that look after that. So our conveyancing proposition actually sits around a mover essentials team, whose job it is to support that buyer through that house hunting journey. So we provide services like offer coaching, which ironically works really well for the estate agents. So we actually get quite a few referrals from estate agents, primarily with first-time buyers, that are making an offer on a property that they think would benefit from that offer coaching service.
So the mortgage advisor provides the offer coaching service to the applicant.
We actually have specific people in our team who are ex-estate agents that provide that service. So poacher turned gamekeeper. But often that conversation, that again ties into
But
our
they're coaching the
conveyancing.
customer, just to be clear, they're not coaching the agent, they are coaching the
They're
customer.
coaching the customer.
So the customer comes to you, says, hey, been referred, can you give me some tips on how to present this offer in the best possible way? What would the strategy be?
What would the strategy be? But also part of that service is getting the customer to think about the offer slightly differently. Because I think for a lot of customers, when they get to that point, they think about the price. So, my dad told me that I should offer 25% below asking price as a starting point and then work my way up. And you kind of say, well, actually, how long have you been looking for a property? How invested are you in this house? How would you feel if you lost it? Well, actually, do you really want to run the risk of losing it because you've alienated the vendor? Probably not. Actually, let's think a bit more sensibly about what you're willing to pay for it, what you're prepared to pay for it, what you'd be happy securing that property for, and now let's work with you and the agent to try and secure that bid. So it's again one of those sort of nice symbiotic services that works really well for the buyer. We get the buyer what they want, but we also support the agent in actually getting an offer that is credible, is backed up with some fact that they can take to a vendor and not feel sort of as you well know, that awkward call, we've had an offer, you might not like it. Conversation.
I think, to be honest, if you lead with I've had an offer and you might not like it, you're probably going to end up crashing and burning.
I think so.
But I think also if you go with 25% under the asking,
you probably know where it's going to land.
Exactly.
Don't you? Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, listen, one of the most remarkable things, one of the reasons I think that Finamply and Seedpath are really remarkable companies that people will be interested in hearing about is we talked a lot about so far the bottom of the funnel activities. In other words, how do we create a better revenue per transaction? Yeah. But the bit which I think is the most remarkable is the bit which happens at the top of the funnel. Yeah. And I would, as an outside observer, and therefore someone who's could get it completely wrong, I think that's been a huge part of your success.
Yeah.
Is your ability to outcompete other suppliers in terms of the ability that if someone gives you 100 leads, that you can get more money out of those 100 leads than they can. What do you think about that? Do you think that's true?
I think without being sort of arrogant about it, I think to a large extent that is true. I think we've worked very hard to improve, and top of the funnel is always the first place you go to, isn't it? Right, it's your biggest number, isn't it? So and traditionally,
and just for people out there, what you and I talk about top of funnel, biggest number.
So we're talking that inquiry comes in. How do you get that to convert into an appointment sat with a mortgage advisor? Because actually that is where you're going to lose the vast majority of, in terms of absolute number, the vast majority of your customers are going to be lost at the top of the funnel. I think a lot of that is avoidable. Well, we've got to prove that a lot of that is avoidable. So
out of that, some remarkable intelligence. And I'd like to try and deal with this in two ways, which is the way you used to do it and the way that you do it now.
Yes.
Because the first time that I met you, when I came down to Kent to have a look at Mark's business and I was introduced to you, you guys had a telephone-based system, which was your primary way of converting leads. Just to give people an idea, some of the leads that you get are people who've put their hand up saying that they would like a mortgage.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And that the sorts of suppliers that you have were not just giving them all to you, they were giving them to other companies as well. So do you want to just talk me through that?
That sort of top of funnel piece for us. So I suppose we split it into two buckets as a business. So we have sort of introduced customers, so a neg in a branch referring a customer, and then web-based where a customer has interacted with the tool and made an inquiry, and that might happen at 2:00 in the morning, and we're following up with that customer at a later time. So with the introduced stuff, that's either booked directly into a diary, and we have nurture journeys that manage that customer. If that customer wants to call back straight away, we call them immediately. We have a system that we use that means we can contact that customer. On average, we're on the phone to that customer within just over a minute. Aspirationally, internal target is 28 seconds, which is completely,
Why is it 28 seconds? Why would you pick that number?
So from all of our testing, and interestingly, we did a big round of testing with Rightmove on this. When we first started working with Rightmove, we sort of said, look, we aim to call a customer back within 28 seconds. That's where we want to be. It typically takes us a minute and 8 seconds on average. And they kind of said, well, that's really quick. It feels a bit scary, feels a bit too quick. And we'd kind of say, well, look, we can run a split test. So we'll do it the way that we'd like to do it. And then we'll also call half of the customers, rather than calling them straight away, we'll set a delay of 4 minutes. And actually, if you delay by 4 minutes, you reduce your conversion rate on those customers by 62%. So calling someone when they're in that mode where they've literally just hit submit and the phone rings, you're far more likely to convert that customer. And that's not just lead to an appointment taking place. The conversion through the funnel is higher as well.
Is that 62% more money per lead? Is that the ultimate stat? Is 62% better response rate and then it compounds from there?
So it compounds from there, exactly. Because if you think about it, your starting point, so your differentiator as a broker is often service, unless you're competing on fee, which is, you don't really want to be in that position. So if you're competing on service, no broker ever says, look, my service is terrible. You're going to hate it. It's going to be dreadful. I'm probably not going to call you back, and emails are going to go unresponded. Everyone says we offer a great service. I'm going to call you back if you ever need anything. Just phone. Actually, if your first interaction with that customer is apologising for calling them really quickly, because often customers will say, gosh, that was quick. What a great opportunity to apologise on the first call and say, I'm really sorry. We don't like leaving customers waiting. I know you made an inquiry. I wanted to get back to you as quickly as possible within a minute and 8 seconds.
And this is the bit, I guess, which first attracted me to this business, which is like, if you imagine a lead in an estate agency context coming in from Rightmove, they want to look at, inquire about a lettings property or a sales property or even a market appraisal, what we consider to be a red hot lead. What is the average time that it takes in a traditional branch context or a self-employed agent context for us to be able to respond to that consumer? And if you are operating with no digital systems whatsoever, so it just comes in, goes into the CRM or just into the email inbox, like if it's done on average within 24 hours, that's probably about right.
Probably not bad, is it?
Probably not bad.
By most measures, yeah.
And I interviewed Peter Knight for this podcast, and in his Best Estate Agent Guide, of the top 20% of estate agents in the UK, when they sent a mystery shopping lead into them, which was a buyer inquiry via Rightmove, half of all of the leads were totally ignored forever, never responded to. Forget 24 hours. And what you're talking about is the difference between 4 minutes and 28 seconds, or 1 minute effectively. Is that 1 minute was the real time? The difference between 1 minute and 4 minutes is that you're going to get 62% more business. And the question is, without a very sophisticated digital system to help you deliver that, there's no chance, is there?
No.
Within a normal estate agency business, that
By
they
the
could
time
take
you've
that
spotted the lead, you're at a couple of minutes already, aren't you?
That's right, and you're wrapping up another call. So what did you do to enable, whether it was 1 minute or 4, what's the system in place to make sure that actually happens? Have you got like an inbox where it all comes in and the guys are looking through that and picking the leads? How does it work?
So we built our own system because there was nothing out there that we could find that could deliver that. So we ended up just going out and building our own, probably much like you have with Greenhouse. Actually, there's nothing out there that does it in the way that we think is the right way to do it. So we've built our own, and actually that's transitioned a lot. That's evolved a lot. With AI, that we've needed to build the systems and work with our staff to make sure that we're incredibly fortunate. We've got a brilliant team of advisors, brilliant team of case managers that recognise how important that customer lead is, and how important it is, how vital it is to get to that customer quickly. But that is a challenge. That's a big cultural step, and the technology on top of that is we recognise slightly beyond the reach of particularly smaller businesses. It's hard it's hard to justify going out and developing a system because, as you know, it's not cheap, is it?
It's not cheap. It's not cheap. But I think one of the things which people probably don't appreciate is that when they think about you building your own system, that wasn't you coding the thing from scratch, was it? That was about taking components and customizing those components. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think more recently it's our own code base because, but yeah, as a starting point, there's some.
When you were telephony based, that was a series of
plugins actually, and actually what we're managing then is just how we've wired those together to work in unison. As a starting point, actually software as a service is by far the best way to go. Yeah, pay for it. Contract terms, are always relatively favourable. Actually, you can plug it in and at least try something. And I think that's the thing. For us, although we're talking about the successful bit, we're not talking about all the things that we've tried in the past that we've looked at and gone, well, that was rubbish. That hasn't worked. And I think you've got to have those. You've got to be prepared to try something and have something fail to get to a point where actually you've got a system that is working really effectively and delivering those results. It doesn't come without the failure.
Innovation is about failure.
100%.
Full stop.
Yeah.
If you're going to try something which hasn't been done or doesn't exist in the marketplace, then the reality is that sometimes you've got an idea or hypothesis which you're testing, and it just falls flat, and it doesn't perform the way you want it to. And then you try something else, and you try something else, and you try something else. And that's what innovators do. And then you eventually get to a point where someone like me interviews you and says, wow, this is absolutely amazing. You've created this unbelievable system. And people go, well, that's incredible. How have they done it? And of course the answer is it's just been this iterative, process of failure. And one of the bits which Mark shared with me is that you guys, and again, I might be getting the number wrong, so correct me if I have, but you had a 14 phone call process to work these leads. I don't know whether was 14 the right number?
It was 14.
Okay,
yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
So you had a 14 phone call process, which was based on auto dialer. So it would appear in someone's queue, the phone would ring, they'd pick it up, and then it would dial through to the customer. So that you had developed this system through trial and error and iteration to get to a point where when a customer like Rightmove gave you a batch of leads, you could get more out of it. And how did that compare in terms of your performance, in terms of conversion? Again, if this is not commercially sensitive, like how much better were you than the other businesses who they were working with?
We know that we converted at a higher rate. I don't know to what extent, but we know from other companies that we've talked to that take similar leads. Our conversion was significantly higher, but.
And what do you mean by significant? I mean, what are we talking about? But in other words, if I gave you 100 leads and they were converting 10, you'd be converting.
So we'd be converting 18 on that basis.
So that'd be 80% better than average. Which is, when you're then dealing with thousands and thousands of leads with these really big companies, that's a huge.
It's a significant increase. But on that old sort of telephone-based structure, that is a huge investment in people to manage that volume of calls. It's a big meaty call center operation to extract that,
and a pipeline of talent and I would describe it as entry-level talent. Is that fair?
Yeah.
In terms of like skill base and pay structure and all of those other bits, so you can show a progression path, presumably. You can become CMAP qualified and all of the other bits. I'm assuming that's how you do it.
That is exactly it, yeah. So actually the majority of people that we've had in that role have progressed on to be advisors. Because actually you hire ambitious, young, entry-level people and, they're going to want to move on. They're going to want to progress in their career. And actually a lot of our people are homegrown people that we've put through CMAP, which again is really rewarding as well, isn't it?
Massively rewarding. No bad habits. And especially when you work so differently as you do, then if you bring people in and you say, going back to our conversation around life conversion and GI conversion and kit conversion and IP conversion, if you've got a specific process which you want them to execute on the telephone, you're probably better having them having never done it another way.
Absolutely.
To be able to get A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then that's that.
Yeah. I mean, I think experienced advisors, we tend to find struggle with the call volume. That's not exclusive. So actually, we have some experienced advisors who are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. But a lot have been kind of, I suppose, cut from a cloth of they'll sit in a branch and wait for a neg to send them a referral. They're not used to necessarily having to pick the phone up and find those opportunities themselves.
Okay, well, it's been an amazing conversation so far. We're going to take a very quick break, and then we're going to talk about how you've applied AI to this to make it even better, even more successful, and I guess how you're then working with other agents as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Most estate agency CRMs dictate how you work. Greenhouse OS lets you dictate the CRM. Build a tailored interface that fits your agency. Experience a CRM without limits at greenhouseos.com.
So we've had a really detailed conversation around what I'm call incredibly well optimized, but old school techniques of auto dialers, being on the phone, being sharp and being on it. And as I understand it, you still use those tactics on your agent-led leads. Is that correct?
Primarily to service the agent rather than the customer. So agents have access to a diary booking system, which is fairly traditional. Actually, they request an instant callback for a customer. So if they've got a customer that needs a callback straight away, they'll plug it into that. They'll submit a very short inquiry form that triggers that auto dialer journey. So, which again just means actually for the agent, when they've asked for someone to be called back straight away, we can make sure that they are called back straight away. It happens very quickly and is easy for us to monitor as well.
So and you've got all the infrastructure which you built for when you were handling thousands of leads, and now you can repurpose that for those agent leads, or I guess it's just a continuation. Now, you and I have been chatting about AI for probably
a little while now.
I was going to say, probably at the point where it was not obvious that this was going to be the big thing. And now I think that argument is pretty much over.
I would say so, yeah.
So I think most people now know that AI is going to become a bigger and bigger part. They are not totally sure how to implement it. And a lot of the solutions which are available today aren't fully integrated, and therefore it's not quite working right. Is that your sense of the?
I think that's spot on. I haven't met anyone, certainly in the last 6 months, that doesn't recognise that AI has the ability to significantly transform their business, and that's not. It's going to come in and replace everyone in the business. That's it. It is a really vital layer to have in your business. In the same way that you wouldn't run your business on postal service alone and get rid of email. You wouldn't even consider doing it. It's a really important tech layer that I think everyone recognises. It still feels like a bit of a black box. Not really sure where to start. Don't really know how to get started implementing it, but I recognise it's important. And I think that's kind of the point we're at in the market, I would say.
And I think there's also, and I don't want to call people Luddites because it's not the right bit, but often in these conversations I'm having, the immediate retort to technology and AI is that this is a people business.
Yeah.
And therefore you take your eye off the people component at your peril. And broadly, that statement is true, yeah? But it doesn't therefore mean that there aren't complementary places that you can add AI. So if you were thinking not only about your own context, i.e. leads coming in to be booked into a mortgage advisor's diary, but also an estate agent's context, where would you start in terms of AI implementation?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I always think it's top of the funnel because I think you're spot on. So these are people businesses, right? And we go to a lot of agents, and they have brilliant people doing a brilliant job, working incredibly hard. But I think every firm that we go to recognises that there's certain tasks and certain activities that don't happen because it's heavy lifting or it feels lower value. So we register an applicant in a branch. How many times do we contact that applicant beyond that? Well, if they don't book a viewing, we probably don't pick the phone up to them. And I know some agents are different, but the vast majority, I would say, are fairly passive in their approach to that. That is a prime example. Every one of those buyers is a potential mortgage opportunity.
Yeah.
even if they're not buying, even if they decide not to buy, there's potentially a remortgage opportunity. If they don't buy through you, there's still a mortgage opportunity. So we miss that. But equally, the vast majority of those are also going to be vendor opportunities as well. Maybe not right now, but at some point they're going to be vendor opportunities. So, but saying to an agent, you now need to start making nurture calls and come up with an engagement campaign to speak to every applicant that you register is tough, right? I mean, we're back to the volume conversation. You're registering a lot of applicants. How do you manage that in an effective way? And I think that is where AI delivers really good value for businesses, is doing some of that stuff that creates more revenue opportunities for that business, but is hard to extract or labor intensive to extract.
When we talk about top of funnel, we're talking about digital leads and telephony leads coming into a business. And the argument against it is that a human delivering an unbelievably well-trained applicant registration is best in class at converting opportunities in terms of market appraisals and financial services. And I think we probably both agree with that.
Totally, yeah.
However, if we also know from our previous conversation that someone responded to within a minute converts 62% better than someone who's responded to in 4, and we accept that we can't respond to every inquiry within 1 minute, then what you're trading is speed and consistency, which AI and automation is perfect for, versus perfect world human execution where they follow their training every time. And I've made that point twice because one of the ways that I've been spending my time in the last 12 months is helping agents adapt and change their charging model. And probably the number one thing which people ask me to go and help them with now is, how do I get my listers to change from a no sell no fee model to a part prepaid, no sell no fee and full prepaid model where the customer can choose flexible fees. And so I've now trained 500 agents in the last 12 months around a listing process. Now, what I say to the agents, I say, if you are using 20 to 40% of what I train you on today, in 6 months' time, I will consider this to be a fantastic job. Okay? Because for whatever reason, human beings don't absorb best practice particularly easily, do they?
No, and we're not as analytical as we like to think we are. So, we'll change things in our sales process without thinking about it. So that thing that really worked, that really won you those listings, you've changed it, you've moved on. Now you're wondering why you're not quite as effective as you were 6 months ago. But yeah, I totally agree. It's a consistency thing.
Consistency. AI, when done well, is still not as good as a human on its best day. And we just have to acknowledge that. And I genuinely can't necessarily see a world at the moment, and I could be wrong on this, but I don't see a world where that is not going to be true. But I believe that most of the people that we employ are probably only getting to less than a third of the opportunities we need them to. And those third of opportunities, they're definitely not getting to them in an optimal time frame. And therefore, 100% on execution, 100% on quality of completion based on learnt best practice, both from a speed and a content point of view, and a medium and a timing point of view, gives AI an unbelievable advantage. So that's the hypothesis. So in terms of your experience of this, you've probably got the best data that I've come across from anyone who's been down this path. So do you want to just tell me a bit about your experience from me from that 14 telephone call process to an AI?
So I mean, that 14 sort of call touch points has all been replaced with AI. So we moved in January last year to a purely AI front end journey. So we built our own system for that. We use SMS. There's always a debate around WhatsApp and SMS.
We use SMS as well for our AI.
Yeah, and
it's so flexible.
And it is exactly that. We actually get a better engagement rate on WhatsApp, but a better conversion rate on SMS. And there are lots of reasons. Well, I think because WhatsApp's so locked down, it doesn't really lend itself to AI yet. That might change. So it's templated messages.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going to put a pin in that, because I think a lot of people won't know that there's a big difference between an API-led WhatsApp solution and what we have on our phones, which we can message anything. There's big restrictions, aren't there?
Massive.
But let's circle back round. So you're communicating via AI via text message. So it's not telephony.
So assuming it's not booked in by an egg and a branch, Lead comes in from a website. We contact that customer via SMS, and then we'll then engage in a nurture journey with that customer. So our AI will communicate with them, answer any initial questions that customer has, and then we'll book them into an advisor diary or arrange that instant callback. So it's an agentic system insofar as the agent system can call different APIs. So if the customer says, "Can someone call me now?" It can call that API to trigger that instant call. If they want a callback, it can search diaries and say, "Yep, looking at diary availability, we've got time, 10 o'clock tomorrow. Shall I book you in?" "Yes, great." And then it'll book directly into that diary. So
the two bits of action at the end of an AI journey, and we're touching on some of my absolute passions when it comes to like building an AI system here. So I apologise to anyone who's not interested.
We could lose a lot of time on this.
We could lose a lot of time on this. Is that you're leveraging your old system by referring them back into that in terms of your instant call for those customers who want that as their preferred method. And then for others, you've got a diary booking system, which, in its simplest form, and it won't be this, but like a Calendly type interface where the customer can pick times from a diary. And are those the two primary ways that you close it off? Amazing.
That is it. Yeah. And it's interesting, the point you made earlier around hypothesis and failure. So that was a journey. That was an evolution. So we didn't just wake up on the 1st of January 2025 and say, right, we're now an AI journey. We introduced it gradually and kept kind of going, well, what happens if we take that away there? If we take that call away, what happens to our conversion? And the really brave, the sort of, I think, slightly brave move that we took, we were still making that first call attempt. So we were still calling a customer, on average within a minute and 8 seconds of that inquiry coming in. And we kind of went, actually, what happens if we take that call away? And we had hypothesized that we will see a reduction in conversion. However, operationally, that becomes easier to manage.
Absolutely, so and less costly.
And less costly. So there's a trade-off. And what does that look like? Is it worth the trade-off? Actually, what happened is our conversion rate increased.
So like hard numbers.
Yeah.
You've got a system which is a 14 phone call process.
Yeah.
You've now got a text message AI-powered system.
Yeah.
What is the difference in terms of, you put 100 leads in the top, how many come out as appointments at the bottom?
So we drove our conversion rate up, just removing that first call by 4%. So overall, that journey, so compared to the 14 call attempts to a pure AI journey, is about 14% in total.
Wow.
It's a massive difference. And to your point, operationally easier to manage.
Great. And is that 14% as in, like if it was 20%, that's like now, whatever that is, 23%?
No, so that's 34.
Like,
that is 14% on top.
Fine.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, what was it before? Was it like 18%?
So on our lowest quality lead sources, it was about sort of 25%.
And so you've gone from 2025 and you've added 14% on, so it's like 34 to 40%. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So it's not a 14% increase as we would measure 14% growth.
Yeah.
That is nearly doubling the efficacy, probably a 70% increase in effectiveness. And in terms of cost, what does that 14 phone call process compared to an SMS look like in terms of reduction of cost?
Well, we had nine people in a telephony role who are now all working as mortgage advisors. We've not replaced them, so there are no people making those calls. So it's a nine in our business. That's a nine headcount reduction effectively.
And so if we said that, those people were costing the company 35.
Yeah, with on cost.
With on cost, in terms of like, bonuses and NI and all the rest of it, 35K a pop, then you're talking about probably 300 grand. So 300 grand's worth of saving. Obviously there's a little bit of cost in terms of the sending of the text messages and the IP and the development of it. But that's unbelievable. So nearly doubling the productivity, or 70% increase in productivity. I think one of the reasons, and again, I'm not taking anything away from what you guys have been able to achieve because it is remarkable, you've got a very narrow focus, haven't you? During as a business, in other words, it's like, we're taking inquiries of different sources and we're turning them into booked mortgage appointments with a view of then converting them. And the estate agency business has obviously got probably a broader range of like possible bits. And I think the consequence of that is that we've not made as much progress as you've made, because it's almost like we haven't just gone, there's one thing and we're going to do that one thing and absolutely nail it. And it's such an amazing example. And from this technology that you've created a company called Seedpath. What does that now do, and like who are your customers for that?
As you know, AI is kind of a bit of a passion of mine as well. We've waxed lyrical about that many times. So for me, I think, working with a lot of agents anyway through Finamply, we were kind of talking to them about what we were doing in Finamply within that mortgage journey. And actually for a lot of those agents, they were just struggling to take that first step into AI. And I fully recognise why, because it feels like a big step. I think a lot of AI providers as well, a lot of SaaS providers that we've come across, it is overcomplicated. The way it's explained is overcomplicated. Whereas,
do you think that's deliberate? The bullshit baffles brains
Yeah,
type
I think-
approach.
yeah, I think-
I'm going to
I
make
think
this
to a
sound
degree it
unbelievably
is.
complicated, and therefore, you need me.
Yeah,
because
and-
this is unintelligible to you.
that is exactly, I think to a large extent that's true. Whereas actually what the agent wants to know is, you register all of these applicants, and there is value in that data set that you have. It's back to that thing. If you phoned and worked every applicant that you register really effectively, you will find mortgage opportunities, you'll find conveyancing opportunities. There'll be vendors in there, there'll be people in there that list a property that if you're not working them consistently, back to the human on their best day, brilliant. Are you going to have your human on their best day working every applicant you've registered in the last 12 months? Probably not. Doesn't feel like a great use of their time. So to actually allow AI to do that, to take that data set that's doing, really nothing for you and let's extract some value from it. I think a real eye opener for me going into, I'm not an estate agent, but working in a estate agency and working with estate agents is that it is a tough job.
It's a much tougher gig than people realise.
Yeah, and there are a lot of plates to spin. And when you talk about financial services as an example and say, well, why don't agents do more on financial services? I can see why, because particularly for a smaller business, that MD is not just running an estate agency. He's out doing vows, and he's managing a viewing diary, and he's maybe out doing viewings himself. So to then sort of drive financial services referrals as well is really difficult. And I think there's a way that we can do that through AI. So we can take that data set and extract that value for them.
And I think when we imagine the world going forward as well, why don't we do utility switching at the point where people are moving house? And the answer is because it's like, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's just call it 100 quid. 100 quid commission for getting someone to switch utilities. In the context of everything else we've got to do, it's a big thing. AI is perfectly positioned to, at the moment in time when the forecast exchange date gets set in the CRM, to fire off the journey, to say, about the utility switching and who you're with. Buildings and contents insurance for people who aren't doing their mortgage through us. When the forecast exchange date is hit in the CRM, it's the perfect opportunity to kick off that journey. And without navigating this back to Greenhouse, the approach to AI that we think is going to be absolutely necessary from a CRM provider's point of view is that we are building, now have completed, a AI server where people can plug into it, and it has all the endpoints, all of the outcomes that you and I were just discussing, i.e. callback, book evaluation, book a viewing, book an FS, so that we can partner with third parties. You've got lead journeys, and then we've got this open AI endpoints where we can feed you the context about the customer, the last conversations they've had. We can feed you the context about, other things that they've done within the CRM, other properties they own, so that a rich, contextually relevant conversation can be made. And critically, they can do something. And most of the AI solutions at the moment, one of the reasons I love yours, and I think that you guys have made better progress than any other business in the property space that I've heard of, John Paul's Prospector Pro, I think, has made really good progress as well, is that if you've got an executable action at the end, and that's partly because it's in your system at the moment. And I think the trick now will be to get what the sort of work that companies like yours are doing, and now be able to plug this in to systems like Greenhouse, so that then we can all benefit from these other relatively small revenue streams that added together can be the thing which drives the value back for the agents.
Well, particularly if actually the agent isn't having to do any heavy lifting for that.
Yeah, 100%.
So actually, fundamentally what we're saying is take your data, so plug us in, do nothing, let us make you some money.
Amazing.
That effectively is the proposition, isn't it?
If everyone's a sales pitch, right, that's it. We'll end the meeting there. Amazing. Okay, but I think time is probably not our friend at the moment. So I've got one question for you, if that's okay, which is, if you were thinking about, my traditional kind of peer within the business, he's got a business, anything from 10 to 50, 100 employees, doing estate and letting agency, maybe doing a bit of financial services. And you have one bit of advice for them in 2026 as to the thing that they should definitely be doing, what would it be?
I think it's got to be technology, isn't it? So it has to be looking at how you're adopting AI. And I know that's become a buzzword. And I'm not a fan of buzzwords, but I think we have reached a point now where both the technology is mature enough that it can do some really, really clever things and things that add value to the business. But probably the most crucial thing is consumer adoption of AI is probably at a point now where people don't mind an AI journey. You don't have to hide it behind, is it a human, is it not? Actually, we're quite happy being serviced by AI, provided the journey's good. There is so much pressure on businesses at the minute with wages increasing, business rates. I think that's got to be the thing that you look at. Leverage your staff more, get them doing the stuff that adds more value to your business. Let the technology, which is relatively cheap, let's be honest, which is relatively cheap, let that do the heavy lifting and get your staff focused on something that really adds value to your business.
High skill, high tech.
Exactly that. Perfect combination.
And again, just sort of recap on the brilliant points you've already made, is when you're thinking about where do I apply AI, where do I start? You start at the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
Whatever is your highest volume, most predictable bit, where humans are going to fall between the cracks because we don't have enough people at the right times in the right places doing the right things, hitting that 1 minute target time that you've now got to respond to a lead, that's where AI goes.
That's where it is.
And you obsess about that in the way that you've done about converting mortgage leads. And if you nail that bit and just keep working on it, keep measuring it, keep testing it, keep iterating it, make it your own, that's the place to start.
That's it. Yeah.
And that will make the biggest financial difference to your business, both in terms of cost, in terms of revenue, in terms of conversion, in terms of growth. So that's definitely a great place to leave it.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for coming and having the conversation.
Thank you
really
very much.
appreciate it.
Good to see you, pal.
Great to see you. Okay.